There are multiple roster deadlines for Detroit on Tuesday that will shape the Tigers roster in 2026.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Tuesday, November 18th, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the app today. Welcome in. Welcome all, everybody. A busy Tuesday that we have been talking about for weeks already on this show that will determine and kind of shape the Tigers' 40-man roster in a big way in 2026. There's another deadline on Friday that will also shape a lot of the Tigers roster. We'll talk about that later in the week. Today, we discuss at the end of the show, Gleyber Torres, the qualifying offer. Is he going to accept? Is he not? We'll dive into the last updates from that before his deadline on Tuesday afternoon. We'll also talk a little bit about news from around the league, Josh Naylor signing with the Mariners. But the biggest story we are going to discuss today, and the biggest talking point today, will be the Rule 5 protection deadline. Always a big day in the Tigers offseason. I want to start with the criteria, okay? What makes a player eligible for the Rule 5 draft? Who is a part of the decision that has to be made for the Tigers on Tuesday, for all teams on Tuesday. So any and all players that are in any organization that fit the criteria I'm about to lay out must be added to the 40-man roster by Tuesday afternoon, or else they will be eligible for the Rule 5 draft in December. Rule 5 draft at the end of winter meetings. Any team can take any player that is in that draft pool. You can also just skip your pick and not take anybody in the Rule 5 draft. The Tigers have done that the last couple of years. Very notoriously in the Al Avila era, took at least one player in the Rule 5 draft almost every single year. Victor Reyes, a Rule 5 pick, few others that come to mind as well. So that criteria is that if you are 19 years or older when you sign with your professional baseball organization, you then have 4 years from then to be added to the 40-man roster, or else you are eligible for the Rule 5 draft that offseason. If you are 18 years or younger when you sign with your professional organization, then you have to be added within the first 5 seasons before you are eligible for the Rule 5 draft. So the difference between 19 and older, 4 years, 18 and younger, 5 years. We do some quick math here. Some quick math here, not year. Some quick math here. And that means that 2021 high school draftees and international free agents, those guys are signed at, 16, 17 years old. Those guys are eligible for the Rule 5 draft this year for the first time. 2022 college draftees are eligible for the Rule 5 draft this year for the first time. So, obviously, the full list of players that fit that criteria is an absolute laundry list. And we will not talk about every single person. We'd be here for hours. We will not talk about every single player in the organization that falls under that category. We will talk about the biggest names and the players that are most likely to be added, or at least the biggest talking points within the Tigers organization heading into this. These are guys that very well could play for the Tigers in 2026. The player the most confident will get added to the 40-man roster is Hao-Yu Lee. Hao-Yu Lee was a return in a trade, 2 seasons ago now? Michael Lorenzen to the Phillies for Hao-Yu Lee. It was half a season of Michael Lorenzen the year he made the All-Star game. I don't think that Hao-Yu Lee has an all-star ceiling necessarily, or like is a perennial, 4+ WAR player or anything like that, but I do think that he has he has major league talent. He will be a Major League Baseball player in the near future, and I think that he debuts for the Tigers in 2026. I want to start with when the Tigers acquired him and really start breaking down his career so far in 2024. In Double-A, that season he raked. He hit almost 300. He had an OPS over 850. He was incredible. Had a really solid walk numbers, didn't strike out a ton. In 2025, he spent all of this year, start to finish, in AAA, and he hit 243 with a 748 OPS. He didn't strike out a ton, but he also, it wasn't a super low number either, middle of the road K rate, and a solid walk rate, 10.5%, 11%, somewhere around there. The reason why I think he gets added, despite the step back in numbers, and the fact that I don't think he necessarily has, again, like perennial all-star caliber ceiling, is because I think at worst, there is a belief that he can replace some of these utility players at the bottom of the 40-man roster and produce more than they can. He isn't an elite defender by any stretch of the imagination, but he did have almost a 50-50 split at second and third base in 2025, so he does give you a little bit of positional versatility. But the biggest point here, and the biggest reason as to why I think he gets added, he is a right-handed hitter that crushes a left-handed pitching. In the minor leagues, in AAA this year, Hao-Yu Lee hit 228 with a 702 OPS and a slug under 375 against right-handed pitching. That is not very good. And there is a lot of room for improvement in that area. That is just straight up, those numbers in AAA do not signify a major league talent. That being said, against lefties, he hit almost 300 with a 919 OPS, and he had 32 total hits against left-handed pitchers in AAA this year. 11 of those were extra base hits. Over a third of his total hits against lefties were for extra bases. He had a slug well over 500. He crushed left-handed pitching. So, I think he gets added. Ultimately, there's pros and cons here. I think that you can do both of these things at the same time. A, be concerned that he may have trouble adjusting to major league hitting against right-handed pitching. And given the questions surrounding his defense, I think it's fair to question the type of value he is going to have as a major leaguer throughout his MLB career. I also think that at worst, he's Andy Ibanez that also walks more. And that is not like my brainchild comparison that's been made by a handful of other people that are probably way smarter than me. But like at worst, you're getting a guy that plays second base, he plays third base, he's a righty, he crushes lefties, and he walks, presumably, way more than Andy Ibanez as well. So that like Andy Ibanez has been very productive and had some of the biggest hits in the Tigers organization over the last 2 seasons. Like that's fine. There is absolutely a role for that. And he's still only 22 years old. He'll be 23 next season and will likely start off, I think, in AAA next season. I doubt he makes the major league team out of camp, even if he does get protected. It's just like he's still young. He will keep making adjustments. The fact that that is kind of his floor is like, okay, this guy at absolute worst is going to be a versatile defender, maybe not a plus defender, but a utility guy that can pinch hit and crush left-handed pitching. Like we've gotten a lot of use over guys with that profile over the last couple of years. And because he's so young, at best, you're talking about a guy that is 23 years old, still could make adjustments to how his approach against right-handed pitching. And if he does do that and improve in that area, then you're talking about a potential everyday major league player that can be a 3+ win player and be pretty darn valuable to your organization. He's got a lot of stuff going for him, despite the step back maybe in production this year and the shortcomings that he also still has. I'm pretty confident he gets added to the 40-man roster on Tuesday, and 2026, the outlook for him will be, you know what, this is a development year for you. try to get better against right-handed pitching. And if you don't, that's still okay. There's probably a bench role in your future for the Tigers at some point, whether it's due to injuries or whatnot next year as well. Let's talk about Thayron Liranzo, maybe the biggest name that is eligible to be protected from the Tigers organization this year. We'll talk about him right after this. First, though, going to talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL is back. The NFL's been back for a while. The NBA is also back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making the late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com right now and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. And we will, of course, be back tomorrow as we recap the decisions that were made by Gleyber, by the organization, and kind of talk about other big decisions surrounding, Major League Baseball, other qualifying offer players, other, maybe highly regarded minor leaguers that weren't or were protected, all of that good stuff. And we take a look ahead and Friday's deadline as well. Today, I want to talk about Thayron Loranzo, get back into it here. He came over from the Jack Flaherty trade last season and absolutely mashed in high single A. For West Michigan, had a batting average over 300, had an OPS over 1,000, crushed the ball. He's a switch hitting catcher. He has tools, highly ranked prospect, a lot to like. This year in Double A, full season of Double A baseball for him, he hit 206 with a 659 OPS. He had good walk numbers, about 12% walk rate this year, but also had a K rate of over 30%, again, in Double A, paired with a batting average of about 200. So this one's kind of a weird one, because if you're just looking at the output, then why would the Tigers use a 40-man roster spot to protect those types of numbers? But there's a lot of nuance with this conversation specifically, really with all of them, but more so with Loranzo than probably anybody else. I think ultimately he is simply too highly regarded and rated of a prospect and still has too many tools to leave that to chance and to not protect him and just hope nobody else takes a chance on a top 100 prospect in baseball. Switch hitting catchers with power don't just grow on trees, and he is ultimately only 22 years old. He's taken strides defensively behind the plate, but there is still a lot of issues back there. He is very obviously nowhere close to being Major League ready. Okay, if they add him to the 40-man roster, it is strictly because they do not want to risk losing him. It has nothing to do with them believing that he's right around the corner from being in a Major League uniform. We're talking years, plural, probably. I don't think there's any chance he's in the majors in 2026. 2027 would be at earliest. And even then, is he going to make the team on opening day in 2027? That even seems, based on what we saw this year, a little far-fetched. But in the same breath, if he mashes in 2026, then the entire outlook on him changes. The interesting part of the nuance here is when you sign someone, just in general, you sign a prospect, an amateur, the timer starts on them for when they become eligible for the Rule 5 draft. And that's obviously what we're talking about today. But once you're added to the 40-man, then a lot of nuance here. So, Barry, it's not this literal, but somewhat of a 3-year timer then starts after that, where you have, because every player is given 3 minor league options when they're added to the 40-man roster, right? So once you're put on the 40, you can get sent down at the start of a season to the minor leagues 3 times. And there's, a little bit of there's specific rules where if you spend X amount of days in the majors and get sent back down, then it costs another option, whatever. But for the most part, blanketed, not 100% true statement. you have 3 years of getting sent down before then you're out of minor league options and you have to get put on waivers, DFA'd, whatever, to get off of the major league roster. Is Loranzo 3 years away from Major League Baseball? I'd hope so, right? He's highly regarded enough where you would hope that in the next 3 seasons he's playing Major League Baseball. And I'm relatively sure he's going to get added to the 40-man roster on Tuesday because of the age, ultimately the ceiling. But it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world to me if they risked it and they just said, you know what? Who's going to add a 22-year-old that hit 200 and struck out 32% of the time in Double-A last year? Like, again, you have to remember when you get taken in the Rule 5 draft, that team that takes you has to keep you on the Major League roster the entire season. And if they don't, then you're sent back to your old organization. Will Vest had that happen to him. Got taken by the Mariners in the Rule 5 draft. And then got Gage Workman, another one. Got taken by the Cubs in the Rule 5 draft. Now is back in the Tigers organization. So what are the odds? What are the odds that he makes it past? Again, I still think I think they're not going to risk it with somebody that is as highly ranked and regarded in prospect circles as him. But some interesting food for thought there at a minimum. Some other players that stick out. Jake Miller. We talked about Jake Miller yesterday with our Arizona Fall League recap. Did not pitch in the AFL despite being sent to the AFL. He is a lefty pitcher that has a solid fastball and just fantastic results in the minor leagues. Now, he was hurt almost all of this calendar season. And like I mentioned, did not even get to play in the AFL despite being put on their roster. So this one's an interesting one. I think they should protect Jake Miller. I am on team add him to the 40-man roster. If they don't, it's not like I'll be, red in the face, angry, and talk about how it's the stupidest decision ever or anything. But even with the injury stuff this year, I think he gets taken in the Rule 5. He's 25 years old, a lefty, really solid strikeout numbers, super low walk numbers, and has experience as a starting pitcher and a reliever as a pro already. I have a hard time believing that profile does not get taken in a Rule 5. And that doesn't mean that he gets taken and then, maybe he isn't Major League ready. And again, they do what the Mariners did with Will Vest or what the Cubs did with Gage Workman and send him back in like May. But I don't know if that's a risk I'm necessarily willing to take, especially with the amount of just kind of mush, if you will, at the bottom of the 40-man roster. And I don't say mush in terms of like there's no talent there or anything, or like in an insulting way. Maybe I should think of a better word because it kind of does sound insulting. But there's just a lot of players that you could debate until you're red in the face on whether they're Major League talent or not, right? Dylan Smith being one of those guys, has had a long injury history, been up and down for a while. Drew Summers, we saw a lot of him. Not sure he's Major League talent at the present moment, right? Like there's just a lot of those guys that you can argue one way or the other. Would you rather see? Would you rather not? And maybe even if he's hurt to start off the season next year, more so, because then somebody can just take him in the Rule 5 when the injury list opened back up, throw him on there and be like, yeah, well, we kept him on the Rule 5. We kept him on the Major League roster. He was on the Major League injured list all year, and that technically counts. So I would like them to protect Jake Miller, but that's kind of like a toss-up to me. I'm not really sure I could go either way. And if they don't protect him, I hope that he is not taken and that there's enough concern over the injured, riddled 2025 where no other team takes a risk on him. Another player that's super interesting is Trey Cruz. We'll talk about him and a few other players right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate you all for tuning in as always. Trey Cruz is eligible again. So Trey Cruz was actually eligible last year for the Rule 5 draft. Did not get protected, did not get taken, obviously. This year, you just continue to be eligible until you're on a 40-man roster. He is one of the guys that I think the Tigers won't protect, but also will get taken. And that's not the place you want to like live in. You don't want a ton of those. But he is a super utility player that just had his arguably best offensive season, maybe in his entire professional career, had a ridiculously high walk rate. I'm talking like at one point was pushing 20% and a pretty darn low K rate to go along with that. He's played all over the infield as a pro. He's played shortstop as a pro. He's played center field as a professional. He is just an athlete. He'll give you 10 to 15 steals as well. The thing with Cruz is he is 27 years old as we speak today and turns 28 in the middle of next season already. So it's a give and take. What are the odds? Like, I mean, I guess if you add him to the 40-man roster, then with the 3 minor league options, like you pretty much got him locked up until he's darn near 30 years old. But he also fits the profile of what the Tigers want to a T. Positional versatility, athleticism all over the diamond, a really good walk rate, really low K rate, has next to no power. I'm not even sure he hit 10 home runs across both leagues in 2025. So it's just, again, it's one of those guys where would you rather have him on? I mean, you look at the position players on the Tigers 40-man roster. There's not a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot more on the pitching side of things. But in the same breath, if you don't protect him, like what are the odds the Rockies like aren't going to look at that and go like, well, that's better than anybody we're going to sign or call up this year. Why not? You know what I mean? So kind of an interesting one there. I have no issue if they choose to protect him, by the way. Again, I think you could do a lot worse in terms of kind of utility, major league, super utility players. So I have no issue if they choose to protect him. I'm not 100% sold that they do, just given kind of the nuance and the circumstances surrounding the bottom of the 40-man roster. Another player that falls into that category for me is RJ Pettit. 6'8", 300-pound right-handed pitcher. Just a massive human being that spins the heck out of the baseball. A friend of the program, actually, RJ Pettit, came on and had an interview with me on this show his draft year. So we're talking, well, the rules of the thing, right? 4 years ago-ish now. Had great seasons in AA and AAA in 2025, both sub-3 ERA stints, first half, second half. We'll see. I think this one, I like the stuff. I like the amount of spin. He's got a good slider. I think this probably depends a little bit more on the opinions of those, again, like Drew Summers, Dylan Smith kind of guys in the eyes of the Tigers front office, more so maybe than anything about RJ Pettit himself, but certainly is a candidate to maybe somebody takes a flyer on a reliever in the Rule 5. But he's a guy that you probably don't have to protect and also has a better likelihood of maybe anybody we've talked about so far of making it through and kind of sneaking through the Rule 5 draft untaken. Some other names really quickly here. Isaac Pacheco had a great bounce back season, but is still ultimately like 22, 23 years old in high single A. He's got no chance of getting poached. They won't protect him. And they also, he won't get taken in the Rule 5 draft either. So that's fine. You have guys like Tanner Kolep, Moises Rodriguez, Marco Jimenez, a couple of those guys. I think Tigers minor league report even pointed out that they already have minor league deals, so they probably won't get protected, but are already it's an understanding that they'll be back in the Tigers organization. The only other player I want to bring up here before we move on is Eduardo Valencia. Now, Valencia had one of the best offensive seasons literally any minor league Tiger had in 2025. He raked like OPS, like around 1,000. I'm talking type of stuff. And just completely out of nowhere. Has not had even remotely close to that type of success as a professional in his 4-ish years as a pro now. The thing is, he has a lot of shortcomings defensively, catcher, first baseman. Not sure he's going to stick behind the plate. I'm not sure is kind of putting it nicely. I don't think he will stick behind the plate. And I'm not sure they're even really convinced that he's going to stick at first base either. And again, this is kind of a one-off year. He like, I'm talking OPSs, full seasons of OPSs in like the high 600s. Before this year, where it was, in the mid 800s in AA and then around 1,000 in AAA. So I think the Tigers can afford to not protect him and also have some confidence at 25 years old with kind of the one outlier year that, he's not going to get taken, but somebody to maybe keep an eye out for as well. The other big decision on Tuesday is Gleyber Torres qualifying offer. The update is, drumroll please, there is no update. We're just gonna have to wait until 4 p.m. on one of the Rule 5 deadline and the QO deadline are both Tuesday. One's at 4 p.m., one's at 6 p.m. And I keep getting mixed up which one's which. So whatever. Tuesday afternoon, we will know the fate of Gleyber Torres in terms of his free agency decision. I don't have too much else to add. I've said it a million times. This all comes down to his market value on multi-year deals. If there's multiple teams that are willing to give him 3-4 plus years, then he'll decline the QO and he'll go and negotiate and try to carve out a market for that. And if they don't feel like he has the market for it, then he'll accept the QO. And still, I think he's still 29 years old, can go into next offseason and maybe look for that multi-year deal. So yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow. Not only the 40-man roster decisions that are made, but also look around the league at some of the biggest names that weren't taken from, that weren't protected rather, from their teams for this deadline, and also obviously the rest of the qualifying offerees. Is that a word? I don't know. Lastly, we end with some news from around the league. Josh Naylor signs with the Seattle Mariners, a 5-year deal. I don't have an exact figure yet still, and it's Monday evening, but it's believed to be in the $90 to $100 million range. Saw somebody say 94, but I'm not sure how accurate that is. This is the first big signing of the offseason. We talked a lot last week that, the biggest names of MLB free agency won't sign until after this week that we are presently in is done, because that's when 40-man rosters are like finally officially official and are set, going into the rest of the offseason. And then again, eventually Rule 5 draft and winter meetings, etc. In terms of Naylor, like, good for him. He hit well this year and stole 1 million bases despite being one of the slowest players in baseball. So I think he proved his value not only in the batter's box, but in the field and on the base paths. And he's one of the more well-rounded first basemen in the sport all of a sudden, which, when he first came up through Cleveland, he was kind of viewed at as like, oh, maybe this guy is like, he was decently regarded. I'm not trying to say he was like a nothing prospect or anything, but was a guy that you knew the power was going to translate to an extent, and you knew he was going to hit righties to an extent, but really improved against lefties over the years. And on top of that, now again, this year stole 30 bases for the Mariners, like in half a season, like just absolutely absurd stuff for a guy that has one of the slowest recorded sprint speeds in all of baseball. So was a valuable asset for the Mariners. I think that there's a lot to like in terms of the M's going into 2026, right? I mean, they're bringing back a lot of the same group that just made the ALCS. And mostly I'm just glad that Josh Naylor is not in the AL Central anymore. So not sorry to Cleveland, not trying to kick you while you're down, but I am so glad that man cannot just absolutely destroy Tigers pitching, at least on a consistent basis, 20 times a year, however much they play now with everybody playing everybody. I'm going to take it. I'm going to take, only having to play him, 2 series a year instead of like 6 or whatever it is. So good for him though. Good for him. First baseman getting paid is good. And that certainly affects the Pete Alonso markets and what have you. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. And we will, of course, be back tomorrow, as I've said a couple of times, recapping all the decisions that are made on these Tuesday deadlines. In terms of like final prediction, I'll go Hao-Yu Lee, Thayron Liranzo, and Jake Miller. That'll be my prediction. Those three. I think I've only been exactly right one time since I took over this show. So don't take my prediction as like gospel, certainly. Been wrong plenty, will be wrong again, as I always say. There's also, the last 2 years have been relatively chalk in terms of like expectation versus what happened. But 3 off seasons ago now, I didn't even say Brendan White's name on this program on deadline day, and then he got protected. So there is the chance for like a complete curveball and somebody that I did not even bring up on this show that could get protected. If they like somebody, they like somebody. And if they think that they have a chance to be in the major leagues over the next couple of years, then they'll add them. You know, relievers are so weird in that sense where if you have one good pitch, a team could just be like, well, we're going to protect them and see what happens. So keep that in mind as well. Okay? Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you all tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.